All right, hello and welcome again to a new episode of the KewCast. I'm John and I'm joined again by my good friend Eddie.
Hey,
how are you doing?
I'm good. Here we are, number 28.
We are moving along.
Episode 28.
Sometimes it feels like we just started. Other times we've been doing this for years.
I heard there's another outfit out there that reached 100.
Yeah, little known facility called the Pickleball Studio. Congrats.
Seems a long way off.
It seems like... I mean, kudos to Chris and Will, and now Isaac's in the mix too for getting that far. I mean, Chris especially, really grinded last year to get. He did one every single week, even if he had to do it by himself.
That's tough.
Yeah, I don't have that kind of dedication.
We have not been that successful.
We have not.
It's tough, man, with families and jobs and
for sure
illnesses and the rest of it to do something every week.
But it feels like kind of. I don't know about you. It might be a grind for you, but I'm just like, yeah, this is kind of like, I look forward to it every week.
Oh, no, it's not a grind. It's, sometimes scheduling is difficult, but once we're in here,
yeah,
we're rolling.
Yeah, but it almost feels like, like it's part of the job now. And clock in a good way.
Punch in,
go
punch
record
out.
Go record a podcast. But yeah, so anything fun happened to you over the past week?
No, man, I'm struggling with this foot issue, and it's kept me off the court quite a bit this last week. I mean, I've been out there a couple of times, but I'm just hobbling around, and I feel like the more I hobble, like everything else tries to compensate from my bad foot, and then that starts to hurt. And
oh God,
it's just a vicious.
It's a
vicious
breakdown
cycle.
in the chain.
Yeah,
for
exactly.
Sure. Yeah, I have not seen you struggle at all, like until recently with this foot thing. So, well wishes. I think. Do you mind sharing a little bit? It's not an injury per se, but they removed a callus, right?
Yeah, and just these procedures on the bottom of your feet, like when they're on the ball of your foot, it just feels like everything's connected to that, and it's like every step you take, it hurts, and then there's other things going on. So
yeah, I feel you. The same thing happened to me when I had the plantar fasciitis, and then I tore the plantar fascia, and then I compensated with my other leg, and then that led to like some inflammation in that foot, and then that knee got injured, and then compensated on that. It just like goes back and forth.
Yeah.
So, yeah, here we are, being in our 50s, Eddie.
How about you? You had a little
active.
trip there, didn't you?
Yeah. I went to Memphis for the final show of my dad's band. They play at BB King's on Beale Street each year. And they're all, older gentlemen, and this is going to be their last official show. So it was sad to see it. Bittersweet. It was a lot of fun to see my dad up on the stage and all of his friends doing their thing. They play blues, rock and roll.
Okay.
And my
Is
dad...
he an instrumentalist, a vocalist?
Both. He plays everything, but his role is mostly behind the drum kit and singing. He also gets up and plays guitar and sings on one or two songs, and he's singing back up on all the songs. My dad, let me tell you, he is never more at home than when he's on the stage. He is 84 years old, and he's still ripping it on the drum kit. He has a rig where his harmonica sits on like his chest, and he can play it while he's drumming and sing and play harmonica and sing and drum. I'm just like, how do you do this at your age? It's crazy.
I have such admiration for people. And,
yeah.
And they just think it's like, why can't everybody do this?
Oh, he's like, and he's just, he loves being up on the stage and performing. And love seeing it. It was kind of sad as their last show, but man, I took my boys and Michelle, and we all really enjoyed ourselves.
Well, you must have the gene, John.
Well, I got up for 3 songs. He wanted me to get up and play with them. That was a lot of fun too. I played 1 on the congas and 2 on the drums.
That's awesome.
Yeah, good times.
Your kids into it, like the music thing?
They like music, but they don't like playing it necessarily. They're both musically inclined, but we'll see. I don't want to force it on them. And drums, man, what a pain in the butt instrument to play. You can't like go out with your friends and like pull out a drum kit and start playing. You've got to have a studio. It's loud. But if that's what they want, I would love nothing more than to encourage that.
Where you don't have pickleball stuff stored, I'm sure you've got some drum kits stowed away.
Exactly. I've got plenty of drum kits. You saw some out here. I had to set up a quick set to learn the songs before I went.
Is that intro you?
Which one?
The intro
no,
to that. No,
a few people have asked that. Even
Come
my
on,
parents
man.
asked it. It kind of sounds like my style of drumming, but yeah, I thought about. It's funny. I mixed a little intro based on a drum cover I did, and the song was actually a Tool song, but I had the drum track only for my playing. And I mixed in some instrumentals, and I was like, maybe I'll do this for the intro. And then I played it, and I'm like, once you go down the rabbit hole in the music, you don't really understand how it sounds anymore. And then I played it for Michelle, and she's like, drums sound great, but it sounds like a Cinemax song. And I'm like, you're right. It's like a sexy song. That would be the worst podcast intro.
Good evening.
Right. So I'll keep
Let's take another crack at it. That would be cool.
Maybe.
Just
We'll see.
another individualized touch on the podcast.
Yeah, there we go. Speaking of podcasts, Eddie, we got a good one today. We're going to go through some updates on the Ripple, and this whole issue of titanium paddles, on some new codes and new website updates. We got some paddles of the week. This week we're going to talk about the Spartus Olympus. We just got that in, and the Honolulu J2Ti, another titanium paddle. I didn't have this in the list, but we played with it. The Nexus, which is another foam-enhanced titanium paddle, so it's bridging those two genres. And what else we look at?
Franklin.
The Franklin. Yeah, we got the Franklin lineup. And yeah, we'll do a little deep dive. And also, we're going to talk about this week what we're predicting for the future of pickleball paddle technology.
Love predictions.
So this will be
Because
fun.
you're never wrong, at least for a little while.
Yes, that's right. You have a good record. You predicted the whole. Who was it? Salome Davidze at one time. Right.
It's a throwback to episode 2, I think. 2 or 3.
All right, good sir.
Let's jump in.
Let's go straight into latest news. So I mentioned on the last pod concerning the Ripple, the Ronbus Ripple, that it was scheduled to be released at the end of September. No longer. This is one of those paddles that takes a lot of labor, and they were not able to ramp up the production of the paddle to meet the demands if they had pushed forward with the end of September. So it would basically have sold out in a few minutes, and then they'd have to. So they're going to push that back to an unknown date for the release and keep working with their ambassadors. I forget the name of their program. It's a beta testing program with ambassadors only. It's the Connect members is what they call their ambassadors.
And that hold is for both models?
Both models.
I had heard that maybe there was going to be one release of one paddle and a different release for another paddle.
Right. So this will be both models put on hold, put on the ice. So if you were waiting, really looking forward to the Ripple, you can continue to wait, but there's an unknown wait at this point. It will not be released probably at all in September. Who knows how long after that?
Well, I'd offer one of mine for people to borrow, but nope, not giving it up.
I had somebody reach out to me in email. He was like, hey, would you mind if I tested this Ripple?
Come by for a couple of hits, but that's it.
Right. Other big
it will be
news.
worth the wait, though.
It'll be worth the wait. Yeah. So, little update on our experiences. I'm still playing with it. You're still playing with it. How's it treating you?
Just fine, thank you.
It's going to be, if I shift away from this paddle for whatever reason, then it's going to be a sad day because I'm really enjoying it. Are you still preferring the R2 shape over the R1?
Yeah. I'm using the R1 a little bit more now,
but
I still prefer just the overall uniformness and the sweet spot of the R2.
Mm-hmm. I agree. I heard, though, that Braden prefers the R1, and even Chris is leaning a little bit toward the R1, which for him is odd because he's started the trend into standard or first hybrid than standard shape paddles. For him to go back to elongated is interesting. So I'm giving it some more time on the R1, but I still prefer the R2.
You doing okay as far as control and blocking and defense?
Oh, and the Slyce cap on the handle too. I'm still liking it. I'm still undecided whether or not
I haven't gone there with it.
Okay, whether or not I prefer that over not having a Slyce cap in. So I'll probably play with it another week and then take it out and go back to no Slyce cap to see what I think about it.
I'm curious to get a revisit on the spin metrics in a couple more weeks because I've been using it. I'm probably 15, 17 hours into it now.
Have you noticed any drop off?
I haven't noticed any, but I'd love to get your numbers on it.
Okay. Yeah. I'm thinking that it's, lost a little bit, obviously, from the raw carbon fiber breaking down, but not as much, I would say, as like a Gen 2 because of the fact that this is a dwell time issue where the part of the spin is derived from dwell time rather than just grit. So I think that is helping prolong the spin on the paddle.
Yeah, agree. It didn't start off super gritty to begin with.
That's true. That's true. And I do, speaking of the modifications to the R2, remember last pod I talked about Mod 1 and Mod 2 for my R2 Ripple. I did run the numbers on those and put those up on the database. So I've updated the database. You can look at how I weighted Mod 1, how I weighted Mod 2, Mod 1 being just perimeter weighting, Mod 2 perimeter weighting plus the Slyce cap. And I actually ran the metrics all again. I didn't run spin again, but I ran power and pop. And you can see that the Mod 1 increased slightly, real subtle increase in power and pop. And the R2 actually increased even a little more for power and pop, even though it's nearly, and gets a whole ounce heavier. It's more than an ounce heavier, right, with all that, the static weight. So interesting trends.
When you say Mod 1, what are we talking about?
So Mod 1, yeah. Remember last week I did 2 modifications to the R2. First was, I want to say, 10 grams of tungsten tape and plus the 3 grams on at 9 and 3. And then I took the 3 grams at 9 and 3 off, went down to the tungsten tape plus the Slyce cap for Mod 2.
Got it.
There we go.
Yep.
All right.
Before we leave Ripple, you want to clarify some interactions we've had in the comments of our YouTube channel, and that is about the delisting.
Mm-hmm. Oh, good idea.
Yeah.
Yeah. So a lot of people were confused because the original Ripple was, in fact, delisted. It's kind of a big deal by USAP. So the 14 millimeter Ripple R1 and R2 were subsequently listed. I don't think they were ever listed and delisted. It was just the 16 millimeter that was listed and then delisted. And this was after the 16 millimeter was delisted. So there's less of a concern that the 14 millimeter will be delisted because Dong, the owner of Ronbus, had lots of communication with Carl, the head of equipment at USAP, and they went back and forth on how to get this thing approved. So not to say that there's no chance it will be delisted again, but the 14 is in fact now approved and on the USAP approved list for paddles.
Very good.
There we go. Good times. Speaking of website updates, I created a glossary for all of the paddle terminology that I'm using in the database and published that. If you look at the tabs at the top of JohnKewPickleball.com, you can see a glossary tab. Go into that and it's just alphabetized. You know, things like what is swing weight? What is twist weight? What does it measure? How do you measure it? What does it do to a paddle? How are the categories we're defining in the data analytics? So like low, medium, and high swing weight, twist weight, top tier, mid tier, low tier spin. I've updated that, by the way. I used to call anything over 2,000 RPM top tier. Mm-hmm. Now, as everything has been creeping up in terms of the level of spin output on a paddle, I've now refined that top tier to 2,200 RPM and above. And if I remember, the mid tier goes down to 1,800. Anything below 1,800 is low tier now. So I think that's more reflective of the reality of the pickleball space right now. Yeah. Anyway, that's chock full of stuff. I'll keep building on it. And like I said, it's kind of like the part of the kind of guidebook, this book of Kew that I've been working on. Okay. Big news in terms of discoveries was a big shout out to Pickleball Pursuit, the podcast. So in particular, Justin at Pickleball Pursuit discovered that the titanium and titanium paddles isn't actually titanium. It's polyester thread. PET is the technical term for it. So both him and Lewis Lewis is the host. Justin's the co-host. Fantastic podcast. The more I watch it, the more I love it. So if you're not subscribed to Pickleball Pursuit, definitely go check it out. They go deep into the weeds and nerdy stuff and right up our alley, right? So what he figured out, and Justin has a background in the paddle industry. He used to work for Mark Pickleball Paddles. Yeah. and now he's off on his own, but he's still really knowledgeable about the inner workings and what happens in China. And so he found a spec sheet for these titanium woven surfaces, and then nowhere on the spec sheet was there anything mentioning titanium other than the color. And in fact, the materials on the spec sheet, and I'm just going to cover this, I'm going to gloss over it because if you want to get the details, go check out last week's episode of Pickleball Pursuit. But in the materials, it showed carbon fiber and PET. Now, PET is polyethylene terephthalate. Yeah, polyethylene terephthalate which is the most common type of thermoplastic polymer used worldwide. So all of our plastic soda bottles, PET. Any kind of polyester thread used in clothing, PET. So it's basically, the titanium paddles are basically shiny polyester threads woven in with the carbon fiber. And it seems to not necessarily have been a bait and switch or intentional misdirection or misleading. More so, it seems to have been a language barrier thing between the factories in China and the paddle companies in the U.S. Paddle companies in the U.S. got an option for titanium, and they chose it thinking, okay, this was titanium. The paddle company, the paddle manufacturers in China just put that in. So it seems to have been the color of the of the polyester threads that they're referring to as titanium. There is some indication that some manufacturers actually did use like titanium powder and in a process to color the threads of polyester in a process that's called metallized threads. But it's almost purely a aesthetic thing. So it's just coloring the threads. There's nothing really changing in terms of the performance of those. Now, all this to say, all of our kind of reviews and perceptions of titanium paddles are still correct. It's still a pretty cool surface material in terms of its performance attributes, regardless of the fact that it is, in fact, polyester thread.
Right, but as users, as reviewers, we need to stop short in attributing titanium metal properties to any particular paddle characteristic.
For sure. And there's still going to be a flood of titanium paddles. I mean, I think the name is going to stick, but I think it's up to us to educate everybody that when we say titanium, we're not talking about the actual metal, right? We're talking about the colored threads, right?
And, we may see other metals or colors of metals coming to market. Gold comes to mind.
Copper.
Copper, that may or may not be actual metals involved.
Yeah. And I would say that almost certainly they're not going to be metals, especially if it's woven into the top fabric as this is. It just doesn't seem feasible. I could be wrong, but we will see. We'll talk about that later on our predictions.
Okay.
But yeah,
good.
so it's a big shout out. Great job. Great detective work from Justin. Oh, and Lewis also discovered that our old friends ProLite, one of the OGs in the pickleball paddle industry, actually had the same layup on their paddle. So the surface had these layers of colored polyester thread and their Titan Pro LX paddle. And guess when they released that?
I'm going to say about 5 years ago.
Nearly. So in December 31st of 2021. So they were... Who says that ProLite's not innovating? They were at the tip of the spear for this whole titanium movement that we're seeing today.
I had a great ProLite paddle, carbon fiber, one of the first carbon fiber paddles probably on the market. It was fantastic.
Yeah.
I think it was even branded as a Simone Jardim signature paddle.
Right. No, I love it. I love that ProLite.
So what do you think this does for, pretty much every paddle manufacturer? If they don't have a titanium paddle yet, they will soon. What do you think this news does for consumer belief in the power of the product?
I think there's a slight twinge there of like, this doesn't feel right, as a consumer, and I'm sure the paddle companies feel the same way, So I still feel like it's a little bit of the Wild West between the exchanges and the interactions between the Chinese factories and the U.S. and all these paddle companies trying to get to these newest technologies first. And there is innovation in China. It's not just
Sure.
here in the U.S. So, dealing with that is still
I think a lot of
sketchy.
consumers are, yeah, this is really cool. This is like metals that NASA uses
Right.
and their technology. So it's got to be awesome for pickleball. And now
Right.
it's polyester.
It's like what they make bell bottoms out of.
Right. So
Bell bottom pants.
am I less interested in the performance hasn't changed,
Yeah, I
but
think
am I less interested in the technology now that it's not actually titanium?
it will decline in popularity. And like I said, it still plays really well. It doesn't change the fact that these paddles have a unique play characteristics, unique performance attributes. They play both soft and springy in a way that's different from fiberglass, carbon fiber, Kevlar. So there's space there for them. But like you said, it doesn't seem as appealing that there's polyester woven into this than titanium. So I think that alone is going to kind of maybe reduce the popularity of these somewhat and make paddle companies more hesitant to release a titanium paddle if they haven't already. So
I think you're right.
Yeah.
All right.
One more little bit of news to talk about. Babolat did start a ambassador program. So I have a code. We have a code now with Babolat, Johnkew, like all the other codes. But that's a 20% off from the Babolat website, which is a big discount for consumers.
Does that include shoes?
Standard is 10%. That does include shoes,
All
which
right.
is very exciting. I will be using that code to start buying shoes. They have some of the best shoes on the market, court shoes.
I went through probably 10 different pairs of shoes before landing on my Babolats and been there for more than a year now.
Which ones do you use?
The
most
Jets.
consistently? The what?
Jets.
Jets?
Yeah.
What's the one that Ben Johns uses?
I don't know.
I forget his too. But yeah, I'm gonna start trying them. I have the pair that they gave me when we visited them. When I try kind of the more hardcore court shoes and see what I think. But I know that they do produce some of the best.
Right on. 20%
Yes, sir.
off. That's nice.
Let's talk about some paddles that we hit this week, Eddie.
A ton of them. Where do you want to
We
start?
did.
Franklin?
Let's go Franklin. Yeah,
Okay.
let's go Franklin first. So Franklin reached out to me. I did not have a relationship with them for years. And they took the initiative and reached out to me. I got an email and had a call. Really enjoyed my call with them. And they're not putting pressure on me to review any of their stuff. They just want an idea of, some feedback on and if I even want to test the paddle. So they, I asked them to send me their tour series, which is what J-Dub and Georgia and Hayden Patrickman.
I didn't realize he was
plays
Franklin.
with the tour also. Yeah, so this is what all the top pros play with. So they sent me their selection. You and I got to hit with them today. So there is the elongated, which is their dynasty shape. And then there's the standard shape, square shape, which is their tempo shape. And there's a 14 and a 16 in each of these.
Yeah.
They also sent me a 13 millimeter that we didn't try today. I'll try that one too. But first off, and everybody knows this from who's watched anybody's reviews on these or Pickleball Studios discussion on their podcast, heavy swing weight on these.
Oh, my goodness.
So it ranged in swing weight from the lightest, which is the standard shape.
Probably the tempo 14.
14,
Yeah.
right. That was 116 swing weight. And the 16 Dynasty, the elongated, mine was 139 swing weight. That's massive.
That's a sledgehammer.
That's a sledgehammer. I think
Good
that's
Lord.
definitely the 100th percentile.
I felt very
in my
slow
database.
playing with that paddle.
Yeah, but there's perks to that too, as we can discuss. So let's go in the order that we played with them. We played with the 16 first. Maybe
Yeah.
you played with the 14. We were kind of switching on. So I played with the 16 first. Yeah, you notice right away that it is a heavy paddle. Hard, difficult to swing. But if you can get past the slowness of it, it plays really well. Like we all know that adding weight to the paddle increases the forgiveness, widens and enlarges the sweet spot, gives the paddle more plow through. And this probably had one of the biggest sweet spots I've ever felt in an elongated paddle. And, we hit with this right off, and I probably hit, 10 drops from the transition zone that went in, and usually I get one before one goes into the net. So it was very consistent for me in terms of its control.
Yeah, drops were fantastic with this.
Yeah.
I would say the sweet spot's a little bit more focused lower down on the paddle face, but it's extremely wide for an elongated paddle.
That's an interesting observation. You mentioned that too, that the top feels a little deader than you expected. I did not notice that, but I didn't have enough time.
They really want to keep that logo clean at the top, so
right.
keep the ball off it.
Right. So these are all thermoformed, so there should be edge foam going all the way around instead of like the engages, which has it on the edges. So I don't know what the dead spot up here is. I didn't really feel it, but man, it felt good, but it's really heavy. I don't think this is going to be for many people at all.
No, I sprayed quite a few shots to the right just because I was not able to get that paddle around.
Yeah. When you do get a piece of the ball, though, it feels really good.
Oh, and serves where you've got plenty of time.
Yeah. Yeah. I think you had to have
decent power.
J.W. Johnson forearms to play with this. And then,
I was going to wrap the entire thing in lead just to get it to maybe 150.
J.W. still has lead on his, which is crazy. So the 14, oh, by the way, the twist weight on the Dynasty 16 is 7.45. Yeah. For an elongated, that's massive. The swing weight for the Dynasty 14, the 14 millimeter elongated, is 126. So that's a beefy swing weight for a 14 mil paddle. 6.6 twist weight.
Yep. Interestingly, on their whatever you call this thing,
the spec
their
sheet,
packaging material, they've got the swing weight and twist weight on here.
It's not quite what it.
It's not quite right, but it's great that they have it.
Yeah, what they say.
So this is the 14. I just pulled this out, but they've got the twist weight at 6.5. That's pretty close to what my readings were. But the swing weight at 122.
Yeah, it's high. Mine was higher than
mine maybe as well.
Okay,
4 points or so.
I think most people's are also. I think Chris and Braden both got in the mid 130s for the swing weight of the 16 and high 120s for the 14.
Yep. So maybe print a range. With manufacturing tolerances, you're not going to get exactly 122 every time.
Sure. But I actually enjoyed the 14. It has the plow through. It has a pretty hefty swing weight, but it's still somewhat manageable. I don't like to go that high with paddles. 126 is above my comfort zone. But coming from that 139 swing weight, I was like, oh, I can move this. The sweet spot felt large for a 14 millimeter, and you get all the perks of a heavy swing weight.
For me, of the four, I would take that 14.
Yeah, me too.
Yep. I'd take the grip off, put a different one on.
Yeah. Oh, God. The grips are like super beefy, which I used to love. I've come around 180
With
degrees.
the grip, it's got to be more than 4.5 inches.
Yeah. It's a really soft, squishy grip. Let's move on to the tempos. So these are the standard shapes. And I was really worried about the short handles. These can't be more than like 5 1/4 inch handle, probably 5 inch, if I'm looking at it correctly here. But there's room above it. The actual handle length probably goes up to the bottom of just above the USA pickleball stamp. So I was still able to get 2 hands on it fairly comfortably. But, compared to the others, I just felt like the wide body didn't give that many perks in terms of the size of the sweet spot. Now, what was tainting my perception of this is just the massive swing weight and twist weight of the elongateds. They just feel so good in terms of the twist weight, in terms of the sweet spot. I thought, okay, going to the standard, sweet spot's going to go on for days on these. And it just felt kind of like a standard paddle sweet spot. But the trade-off with that is the swing weight is much lower on these. So for the 16, it was 122 swing weight. For the 14, it was 116.3. So it's actually below 120 on the 14. But I would prefer a longer handle on these for sure, even though this can get the job done. But of all four, I think I'm with you, Eddie. I'd go for the 14 millimeter elongated Dynasty paddle.
Yeah, well, I think you said it nicely, but one reason I would give up on a elongated paddle in favor of a more wide body is the shape and size of the sweet spot. In this case, you're not giving anything up by going elongated. You wouldn't be gaining anything in the opposite direction. So why not take the extra length?
Yeah, that's true. And by the way,
unless maneuverability is
that's
key.
well said. By the way, all of these felt fairly plush for Gen 2 raw carbon fiber.
Yeah, not super
paddles.
poppy.
Not super poppy. And I think that's largely an attribute of the swing weight. Just the big weight of these paddles. Just makes everything feel nice and plush.
Yeah.
Okay, well, shall we move on to our next paddles?
What do you got? The Honolulu?
Yeah. Let's start with the Honolulu. This one's kind of in a category of its own. So Honolulu coming out with a titanium face paddle, so the J2Ti.
Mm-hmm.
So I reviewed the J2K, the Kevlar version, and this is their hybrid shape paddle. Same shape as the J2K and the original J2, just with titanium. So this is a carbon fiber surface with titanium woven in. And by the way, it's not titanium. It's I just wanted to say elastic. That would be funny to have actually elastic woven into the paddle, but it's polyester, colored polyester, as we just discussed. So, Eddie, why don't you go first? What's your impression of this?
I would say this was my favorite paddle of the day between the Franklins, the Apollo, this one. Mm-hmm. All court paddle, I would say. Good size sweet spot. Nothing bad to say about it. I would actually go so far as to say this might be right up there with my favorite from this company.
Really?
Yeah.
It's big props because they're making some good paddles lately.
Yeah, the J2K was my previous favorite. I would put this neck and neck with that one.
So what did you like about it compared to the J2K?
I like that I can shape the ball with it. It's got plenty of grit and grip. Hugs the ball pretty well, and that's the kind of paddle I like.
Did you feel any difference in how the ball bounces off the face compared to...
It felt very crisp.
Crisp? Okay.
Yeah.
Yeah.
What about you?
So I'm going to give a close-up of the face. One thing is it kind of throws off the graphics. In one way, it's kind of cool. And the other way, it's like, oh, are these graphics messed up a little bit? So the sword underneath the surface kind of looks like it's broken up in places due to the colored threads. But
it's very bizarre.
It's a bizarre kind of...
It's like your dot matrix printer had a hissy fit halfway through a project.
Exactly. Is that focused on you again? I think so. Anyway, cool look. It does seem like the sword is broken up in places when you look at it from certain angles, kind of an optical illusion type thing. But I agree with you on the spin. Like, you can really feel the grit. It doesn't feel like hyper texturized like the Yola Alphas did. Remember those stick to your shirt kind of? But it grabs onto your fingers in a way that the other titanium paddles don't. Like the Shogun and the Nexus, which we're talking about next for that matter, feel really smooth. They get decent spin, but not great. I think the Shogun was around 1800, 1900. This one really grabs your fingers in a different way than the other titanium paddles. And you were shaping the ball. I was shaping the ball really well today. I've not run the metrics on it, but I imagine it's going to be over 2,000 RPM, which is great I think that makes it more appealing to me. That was one issue I've had with titanium so far, is it just doesn't really rip spin as much as I was hoping. This one does. And I also got the same qualities from this that I felt from other titanium paddles, and that is that the face feels a little softer and more springy. Again, I haven't run the metrics. I don't know what the pop and the power of this is going to be. I would think that it's going to be slightly more than the Kevlar, the J2K, on both of those accounts, given the presence of these polyester threads.
More and more, I'm liking these paddles that, at least in feel, they feel like they're pocketing the ball. Mm-hmm. And this one has that feeling.
Yeah.
And that seems to be a more common thing that we're seeing lately.
Yeah.
And it's definitely a trend that I like, because for me, that translates into control.
Right, in a way, with some offensive options, so you don't get the power trade-off necessarily with this. I think it might be, now that I'm thinking about it a little more, is it maybe some effect of actually more dwell time, maybe also an effect of vibration frequencies. So if there is polyester thread going through this, that might provide some different damping than pure carbon alone, or Kevlar. Kevlar does have better vibration damping qualities than carbon fiber. But this has a different feel where it just feels really nice when you hit it.
Yeah.
A little bit plush, a little bit springy, but not so springy that it's not controllable. So yeah, I do think there's a space for these titanium paddles in the market.
And intuitively, you look at this and it kind of appears like a basket weave structure on the face of this paddle. And when you think of a basket, it's got that little bit of give to it.
Right.
It just feels really good.
Yeah.
What do you think of this paddle versus the J2K?
I
We
like
should have hit them.
side by side. Yeah. I need more time with it to really compare it to the J2K. Other than, yes, it feels a little softer and springier. But yeah, I just need more time with it. It did need for me 3 grams of lead at 9 and 3 because I was getting some twisting. But again, my calibration may have been thrown off by playing with these baseball bat Franklins. That the sweet spot goes nearly, it's big. I was about to say nearly edge to edge. Sarcastically, but I don't even want to throw that out there as a term for people to pick up.
Well, let's hit these two, this and the J2K side by side next time we meet up. And
let's do it.
provide some more commentary.
Yes,
Because I
indeed.
do think it'll be a popular paddle. It looks great.
I think so too. Okay, let's move on to the Spartus Olympus. This is a paddle that I've been very much looking forward to playing. It's been getting a lot of buzz. This one is now Spartus. It came out with the Apollo first. That was the first wide body Kevlar paddle, and that was really reasonably priced. So we know that Spartus is coming in low on the price spectrum, and they're not going to overprice their stuff. Now this one is much more expensive. It starts at $200. So I think the Apollo was like $120.
Sounds about right.
Yeah. So this one comes in at $200, a lot more expensive, but this is a very labor-intensive paddle to make. Apparently, it takes one person. One person can produce 4 paddles in one day. So remember, you and I watched those videos at Babolat
Right.
on the thermoforming process, and that alone is laborious. They're actually filling the polypropylene cells with foam, right? And it's thermoformed. So you get all the thermoforming stuff and the foam stuff. So it just takes a long time. Now, this isn't the first to market with foam in the cells of the core, but apparently the type of foam is different. It's a polymer foam rather than an EVA. And they're taking precautions to prevent the issues that the earlier foam-filled cores had. Like separation of the face, the foam was expanded too much and it pushed the face, delaminated or disbonded. I can't quite remember. So this one seems to have solved some of the issues of the earlier versions of the the foam-infused paddles. All right, so $200, and then there's discounts out there, including mine. And this was 14 millimeters, and there is one last thing to mention in terms of the technology is there's fiberglass in the layup. So it's 2 layers of carbon fiber and a layer of fiberglass at the bottom. I think it's at the bottom and not in the middle. I could be wrong about that. So that fiberglass is providing a little bit of extra
So
power.
3 layers on each side.
Yeah, as far as I know. So what'd you think of it, Eddie? When we're hitting it
Well, I
today?
liked it better than the Apollo. As much weight as I would add to the Apollo, it always felt thin to me. And this paddle seems to have corrected all of those. So between those two, I certainly would take this. I left today a little frustrated not being able to really pinpoint the strengths of this paddle. When I hit the ball cleanly, it felt really good. Really loud, but good. But finding that cleanness was a little bit difficult for me today.
Was it a sweet spot issue?
It may have been a sweet spot issue. It may have been inconsistency in areas of the face.
Okay.
I didn't feel like I was lacking power necessarily, just the feeling of just that immediate transfer of energy to the ball didn't feel right.
Yeah.
And that could just be me in that given time and place. I would like to get more time with this, but for the shots I hit clean, they felt amazing.
Uh-huh. Yeah, I kind of had an opposite feeling from the start. I played this a few days ago, a few games, and immediately when I started hitting it, I'm like, oh, wow, I really like this. I love the way the ball feels coming off the face. And the sweet spot felt average to me for like a thermoformed paddle, so I wasn't having a hard time hitting a sweet spot. But I agree with the fact that it's hard to characterize. I think it's just because it's kind of a newer feel. It doesn't feel like a straight up Gen 2 paddle. It doesn't feel like a foam enhanced paddle from the Gen 3 models like the Yolas or even the gearboxes. Doesn't feel like those either. And yeah, I was just having a hard time pinpointing what I liked and disliked about the paddle today. I think it's just going to take a lot more time with the paddle. But I think you felt it too. You said when you hit it dead center, it felt really good. That's kind of what I felt from the beginning. And I wasn't really struggling with the sweet spot today, but I will say that the power and the pop are not super, super top tier. I put them below Paddle Tech, below Engage. I haven't run the numbers yet, so this might change a bit, and they might break in. I'm not sure. So it might get more powerful as time goes on. But I would put this more around like a top end of the Gen 2 paddles in terms of power and pop. And the pop on it was interesting. So power with full swings was there, but it almost felt like, do you know how when you get an elongated paddle? Okay, take the Franklin as this extreme example. The elongated Dynasty, 16 millimeter. It's got such a heavy swing weight that it has a lot of power when you really wind up with it, but the pop is really muted. So I kind of felt that a little bit on the Olympus, where the pop, surprisingly, I was expecting more pop with a foam-filled core. It was a little more muted. So in that sense, I felt like it had better control than I was expecting, but not as much pop, which that's a trade-off, right? It's a trade-off you're going to have with the paddle.
Yeah, I guess in my mind, John, like I'm always like trying to figure out what a paddle is. Is it a control paddle? Is it a power paddle? In what situation would I choose this over all other paddles or most other paddles to use? And I just couldn't get there with this paddle. I couldn't narrow down what it is that it was trying to be.
Yeah, that's true. I'm going to let the pod dog out, scratching the door.
That's me scratching, trying to get out.
But overall, I liked it. I do need more time. I think once I get used to the properties of it, it might be a contender for like a really impressive paddle for me. At this point, I'm just a little confused on it because it does play differently. But I like that. I think it's fun that there's newer technologies. Another thing I wanted to talk about in terms of its properties, its performance properties, is it feels like it's going to have more dwell time, but it doesn't materialize in a lot of dwell time for me. It got good spin because of the raw carbon fiber texture, but it didn't feel like hitting the Ripple or the Yola Gen 3s or the gearboxes, and the ball is pocketed. And I think it's because there's still, even though it's foam in the center, there's still that polypropylene core, which has the same properties as a Gen 2 paddle, right? So it's kind of a crispy core. But the foam kind of deadens everything. I think most of what we're feeling that feels good is probably, again, related to the vibration frequencies being deadened because of all the damping going on inside of it. But yeah, I think it's a interesting paddle with good potential.
It could be that it's a category in and of itself.
Right.
We haven't quite stumbled onto what that is yet.
Exactly. So, Eddie, let's bridge the gap now between titanium paddles and foam-filled cores with the Nexus paddle.
Yeah, this wasn't even on the list for today to talk about.
No. They reached out to me, and I missed the original email and finally replied to them, and they graciously sent me a paddle. So this is a titanium surface with a foam-filled core. I don't think it's the same type of foam. I think it's either EVA or like the expanding foams. So it's not the same as the Spartus Olympus, but there's some similar properties.
But it still has polypropylene honeycomb.
It has polypropylene honeycomb,
Filled
and
with
the
foam.
cells are filled with foam, and it's thermoformed. This shape is elongated, so similar shape to the bread and butter Shogun, the original titanium paddle. Eddie, what are your thoughts on this one?
Well, unfortunately, it wields a lot like the Franklins. It's
heavy,
very heavy,
yeah.
very heavy. But its properties are amazing. If they could figure out a way to reduce that swing weight, I think they would be really onto something, because everything else about this paddle, I think, is fantastic.
Yeah, it does have a heavy swing weight, and I assume that's because the foam and filling the cores is adding weight to it, and it's not the same type of foam as the Olympus, so it's heavier.
Do you have a swing weight on that?
I don't. I should have grabbed it before we started. It feels mid 120s to me, though. maybe high 120s. Yeah, so I noticed that too. It did have some similar qualities to the Shogun in terms of the titanium surface and the polyester threads. So a little bit springier and more soft than your traditional raw carbon fiber. The texture on this isn't great. I didn't feel like it got great spin. Maybe that's just me being snooty because it doesn't feel like it gets a lot of grip, but it definitely didn't dip as much as
The J2Ti.
the J2Ti. Yeah,
That's true.
The spinniest of the paddles today. So yeah, there's that unique property of the polyester threads combined with that deadening vibration of the foam in the interior. I didn't get a good sense of which is more powerful, inherently more powerful, this or the Olympus. I'm leaning towards the Olympus because it is a hybrid shape, not elongated, and I didn't feel like this had any more power than the Olympus playing with it today. Even though it is elongated, you're getting more leverage with that length and the longer handle. So when I really wound up for serves, this might have even been a little lower than the Olympus, but again, I need a little more time. That's just my initial impression. But yeah, I mean, I think it hit pretty well. It felt pretty good. I'd say the sweet spot feels about average for a thermoformed paddle. You know, nothing super special, nothing small either. And it is kind of combining the titanium feel together with a foam-filled core feel.
I think there's a lot of work that needs to be done in incorporating foam into paddles. And foam isn't even one thing anymore. It's a whole variety of things. And how that interfaces with polypropylene and other potential core materials is something we will see more of and probably talk about more later today.
Yes, indeed. So one last look at the Nexus, a close-up. I mean, these threads, now that I know that they're polyester, it's kind of like, oh, it's a bedazzled paddle, but it still looks pretty sharp, these shiny threads going through the paddle. Okay.
So that's it for our POWs.
That's
POTWs.
Let's move on to some deep dives. So this week we wanted to talk about what can we predict for future paddles? What do we think 2025 is going to offer in terms of...
We might not even make it to 2025 with some of these predictions.
Exactly. We'll see. So we're putting on our wizard caps, trying to predict the future here. So this is kind of a combination of what I think will happen and what I hope will happen. Kind of my wish list for where I want to see paddles go and where I think they actually will go.
All right.
Yeah. Do you want to start?
So we're just doing paddles today.
Just paddles.
Not the sport overall or other technologies.
Let's save that for another close to year-end.
How do you want to do this? Are we going back and forth? Or are you going to do your whole list and my whole list?
Let's go back and forth.
All right. What do you got for number one? Okay. In no particular order, I assume.
No particular order. I guess we can kind of play off each other if one of our themes matches.
Okay.
And you and I have not spoken about what our themes are, about our details, other than the topic. So one of the things I think actually will happen, and you know, the news is that USAP will be rolling out their PBCOR, the coefficient of restitution, exit velocity guidelines in the fourth quarter. So sometime by the end of the year, that will be rolled out, and that will be a new regulation for USAP. Now, my hunch is that they're going to cap power, exit velocity, somewhere between the Paddletech Bantams, the powerful Paddletechs, and the now delisted Yola Gen 3s. Now, the reason I'm saying this is because that's about where the Ripple falls, and that has been USAP approved. I don't know the details on that approval, if it actually involved a PBCOR, but if that is the case, then that's about where it's going to fall. So I think that's going to be our cap, which I think is about right. That feels right to me in terms of where power should be capped for pickleball paddles. Now, one thing I think is good about this, so this whole releasing and capping power for paddles, both in the USAP, and we hear that the UPA is also working on it. So when that happens, I think I saw that curl of the lip there, Eddie. When that happens, I think it's going to be good for paddle innovation because it's going to put the halt on the arms race all paddles are trying to get more and more powerful and open up innovation in other aspects of paddles, which we can get into a little later. So that's my first one.
And mine is related to that, and it's related in the fallout of all that. We're going to see, because of all the scrutiny and changing dynamics for standardization and that sort of thing, the whole landscape is going to become intolerable for a lot of fly-by-night manufacturers. So I predict we're going to see a lot fewer manufacturers. We're going to see current manufacturers just leave the business because it's either too costly in terms of the payments you have to make to just get certified, but to even get to that point in the manufacturing process, the testing equipment that manufacturers are going to have to either sign on to or bring in-house,
Right.
It's going to be too much, too difficult.
Yeah, for sure. I think that you're right. The bar of entry is going to be way too high.
The days of 500 paddle manufacturers and 5,000 lines of paddles is a thing of the past.
All right. Another trend we're already seeing now, which I think will continue, is that standard and wide body paddles will be more widely accepted. I think that's, like I said, well underway already. But what we're seeing now, also a trend starting to emerge, is that the wide body paddles are becoming more powerful. And I think for the wide body paddles to be widely accepted, it needs to reach a parity in terms of the power output from those wide bodies compared to more elongated paddles. Because right now you just get more leverage with a longer paddle. You get more powerful paddles naturally because of that leverage. But there are ways you can manipulate the materials and the core in a wide body paddle to provide that extra firepower that people probably want. Not all paddles need to be powerful, but if people are coming from a elongated paddle and they want the benefits of a wider sweet spot, more forgiving wide body paddle, then they're also going to want best of both worlds, so some power in those as well. And, I feel like from the earliest popular wide body paddle, so the Volair Mach 2 Forza, it started that trend. Even though that's a very soft control-oriented paddle, it was the first one to use a longer handle, providing that leverage for a little bit more offensive options. And we've seen progressive steps toward this power output in paddles. But like I said, for them to become widely accepted, I think the power needs to be there. So it needs to be options, at least, for the most powerful paddles on the market to also include wide body paddles.
And we're seeing that more and more with the Ripple R2, with the Scorpia shape. That super wide, longer handle paddle, I think, is something that we're definitely seeing more of. I think we're going to get to a point where every manufacturer is going to have something like that in their line. It used to be every paddle manufacturer had to have the standard and elongated shape. Added on the hybrid to that, and now we're going to see this long-handled wide-body shape everywhere. And I think that's a great thing because I love that shape.
I do too. I never would have thought last year that I would have been playing with a wide-body paddle, and now I sure am. And the Ripple R2 is a perfect example of that.
Exactly.
High power output, wide-body paddle.
Exactly.
Okay. What do you got, Eddie?
Well, we've seen some of this already. My prediction for 2025 is even more extreme adjustability in weight setups. We've seen Slyce cap really take off. That's kind of a one-size-fits-all approach, whereas we may see paddles coming out with 4, 5, 6 different weight options, adjustable on the fly inside of handles. We're going to see things that, Adidas had their crazy metal bone with variable setups for weight. They put that weight in a crazy spot, but I think we're going to see more options like that where users can pick from a variety of weights to put in the handle or along the frame to really sort of nail down personal preference.
Mind meld, Eddie. That was exactly my next point. Mine's a little slightly different, but yeah, exactly. I think internal weighting, we've seen it come a long way since the beginning of the year, but I still think it's in its infancy. And it's just kind of amazing to me to think that most of last year, weighting of a paddle was just not really even an afterthought. It wasn't a thought. Like, companies took what the factories gave them and put them out on the market. And I'm sure some of the factories had some thought, like if it got too head heavy, they'd eventually hear about it and they would manipulate the materials. But I think there's so much more potential in internal weighting in a paddle. Where I slightly differ from you, I think that we're going to see a move away from adjustable weighting, so consumer adjustable weighting, rather not including the add-ons like the tungsten tape and the Slyce caps and that sort of thing, and more of a movement toward here are a series of options within a single paddle model for different weighting parameters. So you can have more head heavy, more head light, more equal balance, wider, a bigger twist weight. But I think that most people, most manufacturers and paddle companies now are keen on the fact that they want to focus on the swing weight to twist weight ratio, that being low swing weight, high twist weight to maximize the width of the sweet spot. And now balance point is coming into it, right? So balance point can be, it's a subjective thing. Some people like head heavy paddles, other people like head light, and there's performance perks to both of those, right? So I think what we're going to see is like, it may not be spelled out in terms of, okay, this has a balance point of 24 or whatever, but it'll be like, okay, this paddle, this model is a head light version, and you can get a head heavy version also. Or it might even be more mundane. It might even be easier to digest terminology like fast hands, slow hands, something like that. Although nobody's going to buy a slow hands paddle. So anyway, I think that they're going to provide more options for stock paddles. And I don't know, I just feel like it's becoming more difficult to deal with weighting systems that you can adjust yourself rather than just sticking on lead tape, tungsten tape, and Slyce caps. I do think that companies are, the first step in this is that companies are going to offer stock weighted base caps in the handle, right? It can be stock, which is like a quarter of an ounce. The plastic and the staples all come out to about a quarter of an ounce. Mm-hmm. You might have a half ounce option and a full ounce option for just the stock caps.
So you think they'll have weighted caps?
I think so.
Or a variety of weighted caps?
I think paddle companies are going to start offering varieties of weights.
Yeah, I think they'll go a different route. I think they'll go with more of a screw-in system where, a paddle might be sold with a number of different weighted screws that you can then adjust as you see fit on the fly.
Yeah, well, I mean, hopefully something will come up. It just seems unwieldy. Like the Gamma Airbender is cool concept, and what were the original replaceable base caps called? That paddle company, Grip Company. Yeah, cool concept, but to me, it seems like once you figure out what you like, then you just stick with it. So just having stock options and those options is a more preferable thing to me.
Fair enough.
We'll see. All right, Eddie, what's your next one?
So we've seen a lot of different paddle faces come about this year, everything from Kevlar to now titanium colored and the rest of it, of course, raw carbon fiber. I don't think we're going to necessarily see a bunch of new faces in 2025, but I think we'll see a ton of different core setups coming in 2025, potentially using carbon fiber tubes, not necessarily in the way that Gearbox does it as ribs, but maybe tubes running perpendicular to the face. Who knows? But we're going to see carbon fiber. We're going to see more foam, and maybe moving away from polypropylene as a core material.
Yeah, I like it. I had the core materials bullet point in my predictions also, so I'll scroll down to that.
All right.
This one's fun for me because I think you're right. I think more foam is definitely a given at this point, and more kind of hybridization of different materials within the core. I do think we're going to get some cross-pollination outside of racket sports, board sports in particular. So skateboarding, surfing, skiing, snowboarding. I think paddles are going to start borrowing technology from those sports. They've been around a lot longer, not than tennis or whatever, but let's compare apples to apples here. There's going to be a lot of dovetailing between the beneficial aspects of board sports and pickleball paddles. So I was looking around at kind of what technology snowboards use, for example, and snowboards use the main top layer in snowboards is a triaxial fiberglass. as the structural facing. And they also incorporate other types of materials in their layups. So similar to PET, so the quote unquote titanium threads, this PET plastic, it's one type of thermoplastic polymer. I think there are other thermoplastic polymers that can come into play, both in terms of the facing material and the core materials, which was your point. So for example, skis and snowboards use PBT, which is polybutylene terephthalate, right? Which is more heat resistant and more impact resistant than PET, which is the plastic polymer that we're using now for the titanium threads, right? So I think that's an interesting, good properties of another type of polymer that could be adapted and adopted into paddles. I was also looking, some snowboards use what they're terming a carbonium PBT. So this polymer PBT, which is a top sheet of a woven, they call it carbonium, because they're modeling it after the 3K woven carbon fiber cloth, but it's all PBT. So you can imagine if these threads of PET are actually making the paddle face feel differently in terms of the softness and the springiness. Just still up for debate. We don't know if it's actually the PET threads or if it's because the 3K twill weave is looser because they're incorporating those weaves. We don't know exactly what's causing that. But you can imagine if just those threads alone were causing that performance difference, imagine like a whole face of a polymer woven like a 3K twill. What would that feel like? Who knows? It might be too poppy to play with, but I think some more experimentation and incorporation of these different materials into both the facing materials and cores. So you started with cores. I kind of dovetailed that in with facing materials. Is that one of yours also?
Nope.
Okay. Well, let me wrap that
Sure.
wrap that into this discussion too before you get to your next bullet point. So I do think that there will be more composite weaves. So instead of, similar to the titanium PET stuff, I think we're going to start seeing stuff like, okay, let's incorporate not only Kevlar carbon fiber like Apes spearheaded last year, but Kevlar carbon fiber titanium or PET, and as well as different layups as well. So we're seeing big popularity in terms of the carbon fiber, 2 carbon fiber plus 1 fiberglass layup in the layers beneath the surface, so that those unidirectional layers. I think there's a lot more potential in materials, fibers for the unidirectional prepreg layers underneath the surface to affect the performance of a paddle. I don't know if they make Kevlar unidirectional prepreg, but that could be a potential. And a whole host of other materials that come in these fibers could create these subtle differences or even profound differences in the performance. I think there's going to be more use of triaxial weaves. I'd mentioned that snowboards use a triaxial fiberglass, which would be cool in and of itself. But also, I was reading in these triaxial weaves. Now, we've got triaxial weaves already with the kind of the shapeshifter and the diadem 18K before that. But those are all 18K toes. So those really thick toes that are literally like an inch thick. I think we're going to see more triaxial woven composite fabrics at the 3K level, which is like, only a couple of millimeters thick. That's what most of these Kevlar paddles, when you can kind of see the fabric underneath, that's a 3K cloth. And I think one of the cool things about the triaxial cloth is that it allows the manufacturer to control different aspects of the performance of the snowboards that I was looking at, and presumably also in terms of paddle performance. So in particular, flex, twist, and absorption, vibration absorption is controlled with these triaxial weaves. So I think there's a lot of potential, untapped potential in triaxial weaves. Anything you want to talk about in terms of the surface, the texture? Is that on your list as well?
Surface was not on my list.
Okay.
I was hyper-focused on cores.
Okay. Yeah.
I mean, there's always going to be a refinement of surfaces.
For sure. And I think in particular for surfaces, I think I'm hoping that the regulations are relaxed on the coefficient of friction and the spin potential will be more reflective of performance-based spin. So you can go up to X amount of spin using whatever whatever technique you like. So I hope that they relax the coefficient of friction so that more friction-based smooth surfaces could be used on paddles, similar to obviously the Proton Series 1 spearheaded all of that. And that also relates to everybody's desire to have a more durable surface texture, right? One that doesn't wear down through abrasion. So that would be great. I also think that the replaceable skins are going to be obviously big in 2025. So Reload, and I think individual companies, which Pickle has already started down this path, are going to have their own versions of replaceable skins, because that's a huge thing to be able to refurbish your spin without buying a whole new paddle.
What do you think about the future of quiet?
Well, let's hear your thoughts on it.
I think there's a huge marketplace out there. I mean, noise complaints are just exploding, and communities are giving up on pickleball because of it. We've got basically 2 manufacturers now focused on quiet paddles, Owl and Diadem. There may be others I don't know about, but 2 is not even touching the marketplace.
For sure.
Now, if they could make quiet as well as high performance in every way that's going to be competitive with what's out there, which I think is possible, I think they'll be onto something there.
Yeah, for sure. I think that's... Yeah, I think there does have to be a trade-off with quiet paddles, at least at first, and that's what we're seeing with the Owl and the Diadem Hush. What I mean by a trade-off is people probably aren't going to play with the quiet paddle unless they're forced to, or they're not going to adopt a quiet paddle unless it plays incredibly well. So the Owl gets incredible spin. The Diadem is an explosion of amazing properties in a paddle that shouldn't be there because they're so amazing, right? So,
but isn't it easier to detune something than it is to build it up into a crazy weapon?
Yeah, for sure. So I think Diadem is more so on the right path than Owl. I think Owl has a long way to go before with their paddles before it would appeal to a wider audience. But heck,
I think Diadem is really an interesting case because that paddle is so fun that people are wanting to play with it in any circumstance. Now, if they could just make it, legal.
Yeah, I mean,
it's fantastic.
A highly innovative paddle. All the materials they used in it and the technology. And I love it, but it is well outside the bounds of where we should be in pickleball. But yeah, detune it a little bit. Yeah. Really release it. I think it would be fantastic.
Yep. Anything else on your list?
I got some others. I'd like to hear your next one.
My next one is technology, the incorporation of smart technology to give players information about what's happening with their paddle. And this could be in the form of something embedded on their phone that looks at them via film, or technology that's actually built into the paddle itself that's showing things like swing speed, hand speed, that sort of thing. I think could be a really interesting integration between technology and paddles. I've seen some, prototypes of caps used in tennis. Basically, it's a cap that connects via Bluetooth with your phone. It's giving you metrics on what's happening with your spin. That could be really interesting for pickleball.
I love that idea. I did not think about that, but you're spurring some thoughts in my head. I can imagine like a Slyce cap, a smart Slyce cap that gives you the data on swing speed and velocity and
potentially vibration and those kinds of metrics.
Ooh, I love it. I love it, Eddie.
Man, John, your eyes are...
That's excellent.
Perhaps somebody's already working on it.
We will see. One small thing before I get into the next bigger one. I think handles are lagging behind in terms of technology for paddles. Most paddles are still using like the pallets stuck on top of the core that's just extended down into the handle, and it leads to inconsistent circumferences and inconsistent feels and squishy handles. I think moving forward, cast, at least polyurethane handles, maybe other materials, so solid cast handles are the way to go. So a few companies have spearheaded this, and some companies are using, the polyurethane, the PU pallets, which is an upgrade over the foamier stuff. Anyway, I think that stiff, really quality handles are going to be a necessity in 2025.
Yeah, they're out there now for sure, but we just need a proliferation of that to really cross the marketplace.
Right. Another smaller issue is I think So edgeless paddles have been popular, and paddles have an issue. They look great, but they don't necessarily play the greatest, right? So you're losing some performance for aesthetics, I feel like, in general, with the state of edgeless paddles where they are today. They're still popular because they look great, and there's some performance perks in terms of the maneuverability, less swing weight and less swing weight. Bad side of that, less twist weight, smaller sweet spot. So I think hopefully what we'll see is kind of been spearheaded by the Thompson paddles, which use that urethane frame, and they stick everything in the middle. And that kind of combines the aesthetics of edgeless together with a framed paddle. So I think that's going to be an option for 2025 for paddles, not just the Thompsons and not just urethane, but creating a frame of the paddle and with different materials, different properties for performance in terms of vibration damping or even who knows what you can use in a frame. And that gives the edgeless look, but doesn't have the downside of edgeless paddles in terms of they get scuffed up or scratched or broken on the edges too easily. And the twist weight sucks on most edgeless paddles, right? So I think that might be a trend. I hope that's a trend in 2025.
And we talked a little last week about, what's possible in terms of replacement parts. Could you do a core and face together? If you've got a really nice solid frame, you could just simply pop out the core and face, leave the frame and the handle, and then you've got something there.
Yeah, I like it. What's next, Eddie?
I'm tapped out, man.
You tapped out?
Yeah.
I think I've got a few more, but I'll do one more in here. So I think that, once we cap power and we end the arms race for more and more power, and then there'll still be some catch up to do for different shaped paddles. The wide bodies need to catch up in terms of power, et cetera. But once that's finished, I think the next frontier is going to be enhanced sweet spots on the paddle. I still feel like that's very much in its infancy. And it ties in with the perimeter weighting, internal weighting, and that sort of thing. Right. But there are other things to do. And we can look at the Gearbox Ultimate as an example of how this can be done, one way this can be done. And I gave that paddle a good review with some reservations in terms of the overall shape. I think they missed an opportunity to come out with a standard or hybrid shape, with a wider body, bigger twist weight. But I love the engineering behind the Ultimate, and it worked in many ways. Raphael from Gearbox messed around with the modulus of the carbon fiber, messed around with the angles of the layup of the unidirectional prepreg so that, it wasn't just 90 degrees, which most are laid up at, which is a stiffer feel. When you get closer to 45, it's a more forgiving, flexible feel. And messing around with both the density and the stiffness of the core and the facing materials across the face of the paddle. So it's not uniform. There's a diverse array of different flexibility, density to maximize the sweet spot. And vibration frequencies are going to come into play, as well as the actual return of the paddle, like how far it's going to bounce the ball as you get closer to the edges. So I think there's a ton of potential in that hopefully will be the next frontier. Can you imagine, a sweet spot, a paddle with a sweet spot that's 100% larger than the current sweet spots? That would be amazing, right? Feels more like a tennis racket, but it's controllable. And I imagine if you actually map the sweet spot of paddles today, it's a lot smaller than you think it is, right? I think it's probably like a fist size area of the paddle where you're getting a good return, and it falls off steeply after that.
Well, and then what does that sweet spot look like on a paddle? Is there like a cliff where outside your fist it just drops off completely, or is it a gentle sort of flowing out? Right. So I think that we can make that sweet spot just a little bit more user-friendly in addition to larger by avoiding those cliffs.
Yep. Ton of potential there. And I think Gearbox is on the right path in terms of like this whole SST core technology is like Rafa's playground. Yeah. He's like an alchemist in his lab dealing with modulus and orientations and all this. But it's a fun project, and I think there's a ton of potential, not just for the SST core, but even for polypropylene and any other materials you're using in the core and the facing materials together are going to.
I do think that weight distribution is key to that sweet spot formula, right?
Yeah, for sure.
I'm not sure perimeter foam weighting is the end all be all. In fact, I'm certain it's not.
Yeah. A couple of specifics within that is that I hope that USAP relaxes their rule on not allowing rubber in a paddle. I think that they could specify you can't use rubber within the striking zone of the paddle, but along the perimeter, it's fine, because I think that would go a long way in the vibration damping effects and removing those frequencies that make paddles feel wonky when you're hitting them off center. So I did look at, I saw one kind of alternative to rubber. So this actually isn't rubber, but 3M, the sticky manufacturer, makes a damping foil, which is actually aluminum, but it's a dead soft aluminum, and it's coated with a pressure sensitive acrylic polymer adhesive. So that could actually, I'm maybe giving away some trade secrets. I don't know anybody using this, but this would actually be a really good thing to try. I don't know if anybody's tried this yet, but use this damping foil across the face as the third layer, or between the layup of carbon fiber, fiberglass, and the core, and just see how that feels. If it takes any of those vibrations away, it might go toward enlarging the sweet spot as well.
I just thought of another cool idea for our cap.
Let's go.
So we model different pros out there, and we look at their swing path with the use of this technology. And then you at home can try and duplicate the pros' swing path to try and groove that thing that they're grooving, right?
Yeah, exactly.
And this would give you that information as to how much you are in deviation to the average pro that's out there.
That's a really cool idea. And it's something I've seen in all of our game styles, and it's something you can see right away from a beginner pickleball player to an advanced pickleball player is their swing path. The beginner pickleball players almost always in their swing path short, and they start it too far back. Too big of a backswing, not enough follow through. And you see all the pros, it's a short backswing, big follow through. Even on dinks, sometimes the dinks kind of stop a little bit shorter, but for the most part, Anna Bright, her dinks are coming all the way across it. All the pros are doing this. And that's I didn't really piece it together until fairly recently. That you can always tell a beginner pickleball player is just like their form looks off. That's the major component of why their form looks off. And that would be something that this device could totally detect, right?
Yeah.
Your follow through.
And even you yourself, don't necessarily have good kinesthetic sense over what your body is doing. You may think, oh, I'm doing what they're doing.
You're not.
But you're not.
I remember the first time I saw myself on video, I'm like, oh my God, I'm a troll. Just like, I have no skill. I should never play this game again. Good times, Eddie. That was fun. We should do another one of these before the year's end.
Sounds good.
Perfect. Let's move on to Q&A.
Q&A.
We've got a couple of
Q&A.
Q&A. That's right. You want to read the first question?
Yeah, from JDTD 2656 in regards to the Slyce cap. Oh, this was a good one. I removed the original butt cap on a 14 millimeter pickle Hurricane. Had to remove a plethora of annoying nails and staples. I can attest to that, like 6 in total. Never been able to properly secure either Slyce cap or even reinstall the original pickle cap. The question is, glue? Should I use glue? What other solutions do you have for keeping that Slyce cap in place?
Yeah, and this is something that keeps coming up. So I will concede that removing the stock cap, handle cap, is harder than I made it out to be. For me, I haven't had an issue. There occasionally when I take a grip off, there's the adhesive that remains, and you can't really find the staples very easily. So you gotta scrape around. That's the most annoying thing. But still, I haven't had that issue. I've seen some people send me pictures of it looks like their paddle was attacked by a wolverine after they removed the cap because they just yanked it out. Right? They got so
staples
frustrated.
and all.
Staples and all. Yeah. So I get it, and I've not opened up a pickle, a Hurricane, to see what's in it. So it sounds like there's staples and nails. It's just kind of a mess. So probably more labor intensive than I made it out to be. With the right tools, though, you can mitigate the labor in that. So I use this. It's a Stanley set of interchangeable screwdriver bits. So you've got a burin, which is a pointy bit, and you've got actually a little like the opposite end of a hammer where you pry the nails out, like a tiny little one of those on the end of a screwdriver. So those two tools together, I have no problem getting the staples out. You just pry it open with the burin, pry it the rest of the way out with that pry tool, and you're good to go. And then it's like the most annoying thing, like I said, is the adhesive sticking around from the other side of the wrap. And, I just kind of cut around with an X-Acto knife or a regular knife and get that to pull off. Now, the second part of his question was, how do you get the Slyce cap to stay firm? All right, you're taking all these staples and nails, and presumably those are important to keep the cap where it is. It's not going to stay on through friction alone. You want to speak to that, Eddie?
Well, I've got probably, 8 or 9 Slyce caps on different paddles, and some fit just perfectly, and they don't move anywhere. They just there's firmness when you install it, and it's going to stay in place. And there are others where the fit is not 100% perfect. Mm-hmm. And, you can wrap that thing all day long, and in the heat of a battle, it's going to loosen up. And that is the most annoying thing. And it probably moves less than a millimeter, but just knowing that something is moving under your hand is enough to completely throw off your game. I don't know if you've experienced that or not.
Yeah, just a little bit. So what's your solution?
So what I've done is I deal with that looseness until I come along a formula, a solution for a particular paddle's weight setup that I really like, and I know I'm going to stick with it. Once that's done, take everything off, epoxy the inside of the Slyce cap, put it on there, and it's never coming off. You'd have to completely dismantle your paddle to get that Slyce cap off. It's a huge disadvantage in that you're kind of stuck with what you got, right? And that Slyce cap that you just spent $30 for is one and done.
Yeah.
So yeah, be sure that you are completely committed to a particular weight setup before you take this approach.
Yeah.
But, I've tried athletic tape underneath, in that gap between the original handle and the Slyce cap. Sometimes it works all right. Other times it doesn't.
Yeah. I mean, I think the most reliable way is, like you said, with epoxy. I have not had to do that yet. And I think that would be a turnoff for a lot of people paying $30, like you said, not being able to reuse it. I've had good luck with athletic tape surrounding one or two. So start with one wrap of athletic tape, stick the Slyce cap on. If it's not secure, do another wrap. Get it until it's actually hard to push on, and then you have to push the rest of the way, like sticking the paddle on the floor and putting weight on it.
Yep.
And then I wrap more athletic tape around the top of the Slyce cap where it overlaps with the handle to secure it a little more. And then the overgrip over that. And I've never had an issue with any of my paddles. I've got 4 or 5 paddles that I'm using Slyce caps on. And short of my original one where it did start moving because I didn't secure it enough, this new method I'm using with the double wrap of athletic tape seems to have fixed the issue.
So athletic tape is kind of that nylon tape you'd use for an injury? Or
Yeah, exactly.
Okay.
Yeah, what you put over your cast or your sling or whatever. So yeah, you can put it on your skin, but it's just a really thin, nylon tape. So yeah, that's a good question. One more question. So from Keith Brittingham, I keep trying to find a wide body standard paddle to replace my Mach 2 Forza 16 millimeter, but I just can't find something that feels as good. So I guess,
Get another one?
Get another one. Leads to questions too, like why are you trying to replace it? And if you want the same one, and it sounds like he doesn't want the same one. Does he want more power, more control? Probably more power because it doesn't get more control oriented than the Mach 2 Forza, really.
Right.
So there are options in the wide body format for more power. The question is, how much more power do you want? Yeah, and how much control are you willing to sacrifice? Because there always will be a trade-off. Yeah, it's a good point, Eddie. If we had not hit the 3Ss, I just got these in the day before yesterday. I haven't taken them out to the court. But the Scorpius is a good shape. And from what I hear of the 3Ss, they are more muted than the original Gen 3s, which are delisted, and now the approved mod TA15. So if that's the case, the Scorpius always did have a wide sweet spot in the Gen 3, and if it is more muted, presumably the sweet spot is going to be as big. Control is probably going to be better than the Gen 3s. That's an option. Other options would be the 11624 Monarch series. Fantastic wide body paddle with a long handle, similar in dimensions to the Mach 2 Forza, but with the added layer of fiberglass you're getting in the all-court, you're getting more power. If that's too much power for you, then go for the control option of the Monarch, which has
If you can hit both of those back to back, they're actually very similar.
Yeah.
I mean, blindfolded, I think a lot of people would have a hard time distinguishing the two. But
I agree.
there are some subtle differences, and they're worth both trying out.
Yeah.
That's a great choice.
Those are an excellent choice for a replacement. I'd
The
say.
Ripple R2, if you're into a little bit
bananas.
more power. Yeah.
If you're going to go power nuts.
Yeah. But I wouldn't say nuts. It's controllable power. Though.
Yeah, that's true.
Yeah.
That's true. It's not Gen 3 power yet. It's getting close, though.
Yeah.
Mine's getting close.
But it's hard to tell what they like about the Mach 2.
Yeah. So a little more details, but fun thought experiment anyway. I'm guessing he wants a little bit more power, but doesn't want to sacrifice control. In that case, 11624 Monarch series, I think, is the
Great
answer.
choice.
Yeah. Excellent. That's it, buddy.
Man, we talked about a lot of stuff.
We talked about a lot
and
of
all
stuff.
the cameras are going.
All the cameras are still going. Let's see if the audio's still going. Audio's still going. Home run.
Nice.
All right.
Any wrap up thoughts, John?
Nothing. I've expended all my thoughts for the day.
You're done. You're going to bed. 5 o'clock.
So long. I'm out to bed. Yeah,
Well,
how about you?
hopefully my foot will be on the road to recovery soon, and we can get back to going at it.
Yes, sir. Yeah. Heal well. Rest up, Eddie. And until next time, I will see you around.
Thank you, sir. Take care.